Hello, writers. Happy Monday. I hope everybody is doing fabulous. I am Jade Trueblood, Director of Training at AWAI, and I have such a special guest with me today, Miss Annette Annechild, or Dr. Annette Annechild. Annette, hello, welcome. How are you?
Oh, it's always a pleasure to be back with you, Jade. I'm well, thank you.
So, Annette, just a bit of context or background if somebody's new to AWAI and they maybe haven't taken your program with us. Can you give them a little bit of background as to what you do and how you treat?
Yes, certainly. A bit unusual, I suppose, because for 50 years I've been a yogi, meaning I've been involved with Buddhist thought, Hinduism, this idea that there's a spiritual realm to life. It fascinated me from the time I was a young girl. And then I went back to school and became a therapist. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I specialize in anxiety, depression, addiction, and eating disorders as well. All of these disorders in some way are connected to anxiety. And the Easterners really do a lot of techniques that help us get in the moment and out of the brain where the anxiety really manifests. And so my practice has been kind of pulling in spirituality to a traditional training that I also have. And it's gone well. I think people are looking for, especially because a lot of people have left their religions, people are looking for maybe other ways to connect to sort of the more mystical or magical or spiritual frame of reference.
No, I know it's helped us. We get to work with Annette and it's helped us tremendously. And Annette, I'd love to touch on one of the topics that you cover, that you treat, and that's anxiety, because I feel like that is pretty, I don't know anybody that doesn't suffer with it in some way, shape, or form today.
It's really the root of all evil
Yeah,
mentally.
true.
And it's interesting culturally. You know, we have to remember that America is a young society, and the way that it's developed is very separate. We live in separate homes. We've left the village model. We've moved across the country from our families very often. I had the experience to live in the south of France for a period of time, and it was a village mentality. And there was much less anxiety. They were more anxious about just whether the baguette was fresh or whether the wine was the one they liked than they were about the world or themselves in general or their children. They just sort of had just a calmness about their approach to their lives, which I really loved. And I really studied why it was different. And it was because there was so much support. I think we're so alone. Our family unit has gotten so much smaller. For instance, if you were having a trouble with a teenager, maybe he just was sleeping at Aunt Jean's house, or Uncle Otto was taking care of him this week. There was all that sort of familial support, which is, I think, very helpful to make us feel confident in our lives. And then on top of it, as Americans, we expect so much from ourselves. We expect ourselves to produce every day. And I think that's a lot to ask. I think, again, culturally, cultures don't work as hard traditionally as we do. Not that they're not hardworking, but different. You know, for instance, I heard that in France now, they ticket you if you're at your company more than 8 hours in the parking lot because they don't want to be like Americans. I have clients that work 60-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks. I mean, and this isn't between like two jobs. This is their one big job. So it really brings us into understanding what the effect of that is, the pressure to take care of maybe our children, our families, our bosses, our companies, our money, our houses. It's overwhelming. So what we're trying to do is have tools in our toolbox to be able to get a hold of the mind. You know, anxiety is really an illusion of the mind. It starts up here, and then it goes throughout your whole body. It'll affect everything, you know, how you eat, everything. So I like to think that this is the mind, and this is mindfulness. This is meditation. This is yoga. This is the stuff that holds this in check, because your mind can drive you crazy, right? How many of us wake up at 3 a.m. and the mind goes nuts? I can remember waking up and thinking, did I pay my utility bill? And it's like, of course I paid it. It's like on automatic pay. Like, what? Because the mind is searching for where to get you. So if you say to yourself, oh no, that's on automatic pay, it can't be anything. then it's the next thing, then it's the next thing. It's looking for where to get in. And we have to figure out a way to soothe it, to comfort it, so that we can actually enjoy our lives and believe that there's some flow, that if we're doing the next right thing, which maybe we'll get into a little more deeply later, is a way of appreciating the day that you're in rather than fearing the day ahead or the week ahead or month ahead.
So can you give our listeners, the writers, because I think as well, when you're embarking on something new, the mind then is even like it's uncharted territory, and that anxiety can even be heightened.
Right.
Can you give them one of these tools or something that you recommend
Yes.
to capture that anxiety? Or maybe
Yes.
calm the anxiety is probably the right word.
Well, the key, it's such a good question. The key to everything is learning how to control the mind, right? We know that in sports now, there's always in sports now, hypnotherapy, meditation, so that the athlete won't freak out when it's really on the line, right? That's why all these teams have people like myself working for them. So what we need is a basic tool. And I would say that everybody has their way into knowledge. My way is I'm always interested in like sort of the first cut on the album. I'm always interested in beginner. Like I've been teaching yoga for 50 years and I still teach beginner, because to me, the real important information is often in that, just like the best song on the album might be first. It's the same feeling I have about knowledge. Like, give me the basics. So the basic thing to understand is that your mind typically is controlling you, all of us. So in order to get some hold over it and be able to steer the mind, to focus the mind, which of course helps us every which way, with anxiety, with getting work done, being calm with our children, whatever it might be. So the very first thing I'd like to share is a simple way to meditate. So first, let's define what is meditation. It's really choosing something that you're going to tell the mind for the next X amount of minutes. I say start small, just 5. Set your phone, turn off the phone, set the alarm for 5 minutes, sit down in a comfortable place and say to yourself, I'm going to do this for the next 5 minutes. Now, there's a million ways to meditate. So I'm just going to teach you the simplest one that I still use all the time. You picture a triangle, and you would close your eyes, relax in your chair, or lay on your bed, or lay on the floor, whatever's good. And in that triangle, you imagine taking a big breath in, perhaps counting 1, 2, 3. So you'd inhale, and then you exhale 1 through 6 as slowly as you can. You're controlling the breath. And at the base of the triangle, imagine no breath at all, stillness, because you don't actually breathe when you talk. So there's a way to just be breathless in that base. So big breath in, slow breath out, no breath at all. The funny thing is, as easy as that is, the mind, the minute you go to do this, will say, oh, I don't want to do this right now. This isn't right. I don't like this, blah, 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 blah. And you just gently bring it back and you say to yourself, I'm going to do this for the next 5 minutes. How hard can it be? I'm going to look at that triangle and I'm going to breathe. And it's funny because it never gets where, even after doing it all these years, every time you sit down, your mind cooperates. No, it still does the same thing to me as it will do to all of our listeners that are just starting with this technique. So let's just do a minute of it, you and me together. Would that be okay?
Yeah,
great.
100%.
And everybody listening could maybe do it along if they like. Okay, so get comfy. Just close the eyes. No need to be anxious about this. It's as simple as it can be. And you can do it any way you like, maybe just trying my way the first time. Picturing the triangle. Imagine breathing in, 1, 2, 3. Big breath. And now as slowly as you can, exhaling it out, 1 through 6. Slow as you can. And then no breath at all at the base. No breath at all. So it's big breath in, slow breath out, no breath at all. Continuing on at your own pace. Doesn't matter if it's in through the nose, out through the mouth. That's how I like to do it, but it can be any which way that's comfortable for you. And when the mind scatters away, you just gently bring it back. because you're starting to show it that you're in control. Big breath in. Slow breath out. No breath at all. And then when you're ready, coming back to the room. And just take a moment to feel the shift. Because even in just a moment or two, just a little bit of peace. It just brings the room down.
I feel like the energy in the room changed when I did this.
Me too. It always does. No matter how well you do it, like in yoga, we call it having a practice, right? It's always a practice. No one says to you, did you have a good meditation? They say, did you practice? Because the idea is it's like a training. I like to explain it like if you were going to learn tennis for the first time, I might give you a racket and a ball and say, that wall out there, I want you every day to hit for 15 minutes at that line. And after you did that for a month or so, you would have muscle memory so that when you went out to play tennis, you'd be able to get it over the net more easily. It's a muscle memory. It's a brain pattern. So now that we can scan the brain in new and better ways, all of this has actually been proven. It's not just theory anymore from the East. We see new brain patterns form when we learn a language, when we study something new, or when we learn to play a sport. It's no different in calming yourself. We're opening up a channel where you can calm yourself by believing that you can conquer the brain. And if you do it morning and night, which is what a practice is, and I find putting like a little something to remind you by your bedside, like when I look at what I would call my little altar, which has rocks and shells and people, pictures of people that I love, angels, whatever. I look at that and my mind still goes, not tonight. You don't have to do it tonight, Annette. And I go, oh, you're doing it, Annette. 5 minutes. That's all I ask. 5 minutes. Now, sometimes I'll stay there for 20. Sometimes I'll stay there for longer, but at least I'm going to stay there for 5. So you're disciplining yourself and showing the mind that no matter what it says, you're in charge, meaning your deepest self, your intuition, what you want is in charge instead of this, which has often been called like the monkey mind, you know, this idea that this out of control thing, because you can see sometimes when you get anxious, how you spiral, get a little anxious and it gets bigger, get blah, blah, blah. So this is just a method that if you have a place in your house where you're used to going to meditate, it's good to use the same chair or the same altar, the same place, then it's a vortex. Like if I'm upset, I go to my altar. And talk about change in energy. The minute I sit there, I'm like, oh, I'm better. Again, it's all brain conditioning. It's all brain patterns. So yes, it's spiritually held as a belief that we can connect with a deeper part of ourselves, but it's also science that when we're training the brain, we have a new place to go.
And I think what I love about it the most, and this has been my personal experience, is like I'm a self-admitted control freak, but there is so little in life that you can actually control, right?
That's 10%.
But this I can. And when I feel like when you take hold and just do the thing that your mind is saying, you don't need that, don't do that, and you do it, you feel stronger for it. And it feels like you have some hold on this life that can happen to you at times, you know, which feels calmer.
Well, it feels like you'll be able to handle whatever comes your way.
Yes.
And that's the best way we can feel, because there are accidents and all kinds of things that happen. We want to feel like we can come from a better place, right? Oops, let's get rid of that. Oops. Sorry about that. I don't know why I haven't. Is that good? So what it also does is it creates home, right? It really creates home. Most people are living in their brain, not so much perhaps in their intuition or their heart or their spirit, right? So every time you go to meditate, which is why it's called a practice, morning and night, morning and night, morning and night, it's developing a sense that there's something bigger than this. So not only will it help you control the chatter, but it also can guide you. So a lot of times when I'm not sure what I want to do, let's say I get off work and I'm like, oh, do I want to go swimming? Do I want to go for a walk? Should I study? What should I do? And I'll just sit and breathe. And then all of a sudden I'll be up and maybe doing a task or getting ready to go to the beach, whatever it is, almost mindlessly. It's being guided by your intuition. And I think we've all experienced that when it comes from the gut, when it comes from intuition, it's never wrong, right? You never hear people say, I followed my gut and it was wrong, ever. What you hear all the time is, I knew I shouldn't have walked down that street, or I knew I should have left early, or whatever. That the intuition is trying to signal you. I think of it as like the spidey sense, that it takes in everything, as opposed to the mind only taking in one thing, right? So it gives us a little bit more ability to enjoy the life that we have. I think that's the most important thing, because when people look back on their lives, and I sit with people looking back on their lives a lot, they're like, I didn't know how good I had it. Or even like women look at pictures of themselves and go, I was a lot skinnier. I look great. Like I was miserable back then, thinking I didn't look good enough. That's all the mind, right? That's all the mind. You know, sometimes you could look in the mirror, and if you're in the right setting with people holding you up, you go, wow, I look pretty good. But if you're in a setting that's more toxic and people are pulling you down, you look in the mirror, you're like, oh my God. But it's the same face and the same mirror at the same time. So you can imagine the power of controlling this.
And I think we'll get into, other ways that this can help and show up. But I think, Annette, for a first step for everybody, I would love to pause here for them and just, so you say like 5 minutes, morning and evening, and just start by practicing the triangle, 3 in, 6 out. Is there any amount of time that the whole?
No breath. Don't let yourself become uncomfortable.
Okay.
Just appreciate the stillness when nothing's going on, not even a breath.
Wow, I love it. Okay, writers, you have it. There is your homework for today. We're going to get into another big topic with Annette, and that is fear, which I'm sure that the tools you learned from today, we're going to carry over today, and we will see everybody then. Thank you, Annette.
See you then. Bye-bye.